Welcome back to the broadcast, this being the third hour of Citizen Extra live on Citizen TV and News. Justin, we give you an update regarding the IEBC backup system, a ruling that has just taken place in the High Court. And let me first bring you up to date with what exactly happened. NASA were petitioning for the publication of guidelines on the complementary system of identifying voters and transmission of results should the integrated electoral system fail. And the matter was before at the High Court, at the Milimani Courts rather, and Justice George Kimondo, gave this ruling as the presiding judge. He states that we find that the respondents had put in place the right mechanisms as required by the Constitution. Further, IEBC, who are the respondents, has put in place right alternative mechanisms to support the electronic system under regulations. They've also ruled that there was public participation. They disagree with submissions by NASA that elections should be postponed if the integrated electoral system fails on the election day. Every citizen has a right to be registered as a voter and to vote, and thus the entire petition has been dismissed. Now, NASA has also responded through their lawyers during that ruling. They say that they will appeal the judgment, and in addition, they say that they did not say that elections should be postponed if they don't have an electronic system in place. So they sought to clarify that. Rather, they are saying that what they meant is that the election should be postponed if the system fails on the polling day, that is the 8th of August. Now, just to get a chance to get proper responses on this, I'm joined by my panel in studio. And just to bring you up to date with who we have in studio right now, Mark Bichati, political analyst, stays with us for the better part of this discussion. In addition, John Kagushia rejoins us, a lawyer and governance expert, and Onchario Yeyo, a researcher with the Center for African Progress. I'll start with you, Mark. We've been with you in studio as you are listening in on this. Are you able to tell us your interpretation of what the High Court has ruled? And it seems like it's been a good week in court, whether at the High Court or the Court of Appeal for the IEBC as well.
The IEBC is having a field day this week. I think their prayers have been answered. But the truth of the matter is this: when we tested the KIMS kit actually here at Citizen, we realized that the IEBC had integrated an alternative mechanism within the same kit. They have alternative data providers, they have alternative databases on that same kit, in the sense that they have the 700 for the polling station, but they're also able to identify someone who might walk into the wrong polling station and be told exactly where to go. So they've done quite a bit in the background to make sure that this particular election is able to be executed using this platform called the KIMS kit. So I think the court saw that and it made sense. The second thing is, there is no place in the Constitution where it envisions a reason for the elections to be postponed. And this is a good thing for Kenyans, because Kenyans need to come to the point where we are able to face what we've set for ourselves as deadlines. So this is a good thing. But the challenge again, and the onus is upon IEBC to make sure, number one, they run a flawless election, and I'm getting more and more convinced that they should be able to do that. And the second thing, to be able to communicate to Kenyans as to what they should expect. Because had they given this information in advance, saying that, for example, if you lost your hands by accident or whatever that happens, and you don't have your biometrics, there is a system that is complementary to that will be able to identify you. The third thing that is critical, the law has put a limit of 5% of people without biometrics to be allowed to vote. So the complementary system is not for the entire election. It is only for 5%, and the law has specific regulations as to how and who is able to vote without having their biometrics particularly registered. And there's a process that the clerks and the people at the polling station need to follow. So the court has looked at this, and it makes sense, and I support that ruling fully. And I think it would be, to be honest with you, and I know people will say I'm against NASA, but I'm totally against this whole petitioning everything by NASA. They should be preparing for the election. That's what they should focus their energies on. Why? Because the reality of the matter, if you look at the KIMS kit and what they're petitioning for and what the IEBC has done, those things are inclusive in what the IEBC has done. I think it's a waste of time. I would advise them to sit down and make sure they have their agents in every polling station. That is how they're going to secure their vote.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me bring John in as well to discuss this. Taking a look at this ruling from a legal perspective, I guess what should Kenyans expect when they go to the polls on the 8th of August? What has this ruling effectively done for them?
It boosts the confidence of Kenyans on IEBC. You know, when IEBC kept on losing cases, then Kenyans were wondering, then are you serious about the preparedness that you have on this election? But now, after winning 3 cases in a row, it's clear to Kenyans that the IEBC is actually prepared. And whereas it is not right for you to have frivolous petitions on everything, I think it's also helpful because then it is helping to unearth some of the issues that have been spread as part of what we are calling fake news in the earlier session. Some of the issues that have been put forward to Kenyans or have been made to believe now coming clear on these interpretations of the court rulings. For example,
although we must say that everyone has that democratic right to take their matters to court should they feel that they are aggrieved.
They do. In fact, Higa is a positive thing. And if you look at what has happened now, we have practically handled all the petitions, and we have petitioned almost practically everything that could have been petitioned in this election before the election is done. So in case the election doesn't go the way whichever side of the political divide would want, I am not very sure what they will be petitioning after this election. And yeah, it's true, we still have 2 more petitions that are still in court, the one with the Gladwell Otieno on the issue of the voter register, and of course the other one with the Kisumu resident voters who are bringing the issue of announcing the votes within 7 hours after the election. But for this ruling, it is good because it is helping to boost the confidence of Kenyans on IEBC. Remember, this ruling is not coming from nowhere. It is also coming on the heels of the issue that we had in Parliament some time ago. You remember when we had a very serious heated debate which almost went out in Parliament between that time it was CORD and Jubilee, where they were trying to bring the laws on the IEBC, I mean the electoral laws, and there were some issues that they were raising on the issue of manual backup and the manual voting in case the electronic one fails. But if you look at it, really, even what we are calling manual, as has been raised by Mark, is not really manual. It is still something which is under KIMS, the Kenya Integrated
System.
So it is still under KIMS. It's inbuilt again. And what was happening here is NASA, I think, was trying also now to get into the details of, again, operations of IEBC, which I think the court want to keep clear. So long as the court is assured that there are clear ways of verifying and clarifying the voters who may actually not be captured by the BVR or whose identification may not be captured by the voter identification system, so long as the court is assured that that is clear, and so long as they are sure that on that particular day there is no one who will be denied the opportunity to also see what is happening. Remember, on the voting day and on the where we'll be conducting the vote, we'll have agents from all sides. We'll have the IEBC officers, and you remember we had a vote of confidence on the IEBC officers on the day we said that the voters which are tallied at a tallying center are final. You remember? The court argued that IEBC must have full confidence in their officers, and of course that was agreed. Yeah, that was agreed upon by both parties, NASA and Jubilee. So when then those officers who have been mandated to carry out these activities for IEBC and on behalf of Kenyans indeed, when then they go through that process of verification, either manually or through the electronic devices, then we as Kenyans, and that's what the court has found, is that we should be comfortable and we should be okay with that process.
Okay. Wanchari, the ruling by the High Court does not... Okay, so it's a ruling that in a sense gives a finality that we cannot really discuss this matter moving forward. But there are still supporters of NASA who may feel that they still are not quite convinced. What should the IEBC do moving forward to ensure that what was ruled by the High Court is felt and supported on the ground in terms of disseminating information as well? Because I believe perception is everything in the coming election.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Maura. Now, as much as some of my friends could want to declare victory for IEBC, I'm not going to agree with that. Victory for IEBC will come out after it conducts a credible, free and fair election that can convince all parties that what was done was actually fair. So if it does an election, it conducts an election that is going to be contested and it leads to some kind of chaos, that won't be success. Succeeding in court is not what we want. We want success in the electoral process. Now, as for me, I could want to declare victory for the courts. You remember last time the Chief Justice made a mistake of coming out and commenting on a court process from the streets, which was a very bad precedent. Of course, when you see established democracies like the United States, Chief Justice Roberts cannot comment on anything, even when he gets abused by Donald Trump. He keeps quiet, he goes to court, he does his business, and that is it. That is how you get respect for the courts. Now, the High Court, of course, made a very bad decision, which was based on evidence presented in form of newspaper cuttings, and the Court of Appeal came out and reclaimed the glory of the courts. So what's going on today is a continuation of that process of reclaiming the sanctity of the courts, because we need to be able to trust and have confidence in the courts for us to have a, a fair and credible arbiter in the processes we have. Now, it again sends a message of caution to NASA, because now what they're doing is convincing Kenyans that they're not ready for the election, and they have to come up with petition after petition so as to delay and maybe finally even cancel the election. So they have to stop this, get into the election, compete, and find out what happens. So it's not a victory for IEBC, it is a victory for the courts. And I think it's going to be good for them to continue the process of making sure they look at the evidence which is credible and make rulings based on the evidence that is presented.
Okay, so for while many may say that IEBC, another victory for IEBC, you feel it's a victory for the courts.
That is how I see it.
Let me paint another picture here now and bring Mark in for this particular discussion. Anything that is made by man, even ourselves, will always have an error, especially on days of high pressure. We can talk about a broadcast in a studio like this where you've prepared everything, then that day, potentially your iPad refuses to work. Just, for any reason. You could talk about how during national exams, the Kenya National Examinations Council puts in place, magnificent plans to ensure that every school will get the papers in time, there'll be no cheating, etc., etc. But on that day, it floods, there's a power blackout, anything happens. Sometimes people call them, there's a technical term which is used to describe a hurricane, forces of nature, things that we have no control over. What would happen if on election day some of these factors do come into place? With a ruling like this one, wouldn't supporters of NASA or those who are against how the High Court have ruled, they feel that we warned you that there will be mistakes, you didn't listen, and now look?
The reality of the matter, and why I keep pushing this agenda of confidence in the IEBC, is the fact that we have 41,000 polling stations mean we have 41,000 possibilities of technical errors, human errors, natural errors, and unforeseeable circumstances. This is the reality. And what is my advice to the IEBC moving forward? The IEBC needs to be proactive in its engagement to the public. What does that mean? Number one, right now, they need to be telling us what to expect. What will be the normal on election day? How long should I expect the queues to be? Should I carry water? Should I have sunscreen? Basic questions that in developed countries, you are told so many times till it becomes a norm. When that is a norm, then what we are able to do having on election day is they should have a war room, which means they're able to give response both in terms of perception and real response on the ground. So for example, they should be ahead of the news. They should be able to say, polling station XYZ has this problem and we've already sent out solutions A, B, C, D. So they always need to be seen to be coming out in front and being able to deal with the crises before even it becomes a matter of public interest. They need to be ahead of the game, because the truth of the matter is something will go wrong. And the problem is if they don't communicate, then what it will be, there was smoke and now there is fire. That is what needs to happen. The other thing that needs to happen, and this is free advice to my friends at NASA, what they need to do now is to remember there's only one election in this country since we started elections in 1992 that was considered to be free and fair, and that was the 2002 election. Though it had many issues, but because the majority of Kenyans felt that what we wanted was anything but Moi, what we did is we had confidence. And there is a term that is called the unriggable majority. What NASA needs to be focused on is consolidating its votes, consolidating its people to have confidence in the process so that they can show up in huge numbers and vote. That is what they need to do. This particular nitpicking with the IEBC is beginning to create a feeling within Kenyans that there is no confidence in the IEBC, and then the question arises, if I vote, will it count? NASA needs to change its game plan as quickly as possible, drive confidence that they are going for this election, drive confidence that their voters should turn out, drive confidence that they are winning this thing, so that now they are able to push that agenda. And that is where Jubilee is beating them, because Jubilee is coming out looking like they are confident of a victory. And that's what really the game is at right now, if they're going to move forward.
Okay. John, the consensus in studio is that IEBC should over-prepare for the August 8th polls. But shouldn't you, on the other hand, suggest to Kenyans to temper their expectations as we get closer to the elections? For example, if on the day of voting you get to your polling station, and whereas you expect it to be done in 10 minutes, 1 hour later you're still on the line, you get to the clerk who will be serving you, and they try and check your details, and it takes some time. Should Kenyans be tempering their expectations? Have they been too harsh on the IEBC generally?
Let me say, this Kenyan election is a very special election, and I would want
in what terms?
I will tell you why it's special. Did you know that in 2013 Kenya had one of the highest voter turnouts in the world? Actually, Kenyan turnout, I'm told we are now at number 2. In
terms of spending?
In terms of, no, not just in terms of spending, in terms of voter turnout.
Oh, okay.
And that shows you that there's so much interest in Kenyan election. And also you remember in 2007, the outcome of the Kenyan election and the post-election that ensued has dominated global news after that, for some time, because of the issues that then came on in the issue of ICC and that kind of issues. That then means that the world is looking at Kenya in terms of the elections we are doing. And so it means that IEBC need to do a very good job. And from now what we are getting even from the courts, it's clear that IEBC really is much more prepared than it has ever been prepared before. If you look at the way they have been able to procure even some of these things like the KIMS, these integrated electronic devices, they have been able to do this in good time. Actually, I think six months before the election. And this then means that there is much more preparation. But again, even with all these preparations, it's good for us to be realistic that things cannot be 100%. It is naive, and I would also say insincere of us and very hypocritical of us to expect that we are going to have a flawless election. It is not possible. We must have issues. Even the opinion polls that you are seeing being done, you hear people talking about the level of confidence. That, they talk of level of confidence and the margin of error. So they will tell you the level of confidence of the data we have collected is 95%. Then they will go ahead and tell you, and the margin of error is plus or minus 2.5. So it means that it's not anything that we can do which can be perfect. Remember, even aircrafts that are made and they are put to very high level of perfection, they still develop technical hitches at one point or another. And so it is okay for Kenyans not to expect a flawless election. But what we are saying is, can we have the highest level of confidence in this election than anything else? And it's our culture as Kenyans really to, not to be perfect in terms of the things that we do. But in this case, IEBC need to know that the expectations of Kenyans is very high. But again, on the other hand, it's also important for Kenyans not again to put their expectations at 1 or 1%. I think let's be real. And what we want is, can we be sure that if we have any flaws or if we have things that may not work, take for example, the other day we had Al-Shabaab blowing up communication in one of the counties. Can you imagine if that was during the election time, what would have happened in terms of communication? For example, in terms of transmission of the results. Can you imagine if now we were to say that in that area we are not going to have an election because then we have a problem with the transmission? That would be a problem because it would cause even more tension. So it's okay for us to expect high, but again, let's temper that with realities in life.
Okay, let me allow Onchari to make his closing remarks even as we wrap up this discussion. Just your overall view of that ruling by the High Court. Onchari.
Well, thank you so much, Maura. And well, I would like to agree with my friend about the expectations, of course, on the IEBC. We don't expect 100% perfection in terms of delivery of the election process. But again, IEBC has to remember that it's been given all the resources required to render a credible process that can be, convincing to both sides of the political divide. So it has to do that. It owes it to Kenyans to deliver a fair and free election that can be, of course, convincing. Now, when you look at, of course, advanced and developed countries like the United States, they try very hard, of course, to have believable processes, but they don't succeed. You know what's going on in the United States as we speak today. They're talking about the Russians having meddled in the US election. So problems will emerge at some point. For example, I'm very scared of what can happen if one side of the political divide decides to get Russian hackers to interfere with our process. How prepared are we? So Kenyans, of course, they expect the best. They should expect the best, and I have a very positive view of Kenyans. They don't expect 100% perfection. They expect something that is convincing. Was it free and fair? Yes. Mistakes will always be there. If I show up in a polling station and I find a very long queue, I'm going to line up. I don't expect to be served in 10 minutes. I can stick there for let's say maybe 35 minutes and I get to vote. So that is expected. So it's upon IEBC to get out there and deliver a process that is going to be believable, something I can buy. So that is for the sake of our country. They have to do that.
Okay, thank you for that, Ontario. Thank you so much to my panelists in studio, Mark Vichati, political analyst, John Kagushia, lawyer and governance analyst. Thank you for your time on this program today. And Ontario Yeyo, a researcher with the Center for African Progress. Thank you for making time to be part of us. What we want to let you know is that over the last hour or so, NASA's petition for the publication of guidelines on the complementary system of identifying voters and transmission of results should the integrated electoral system fail on polling day has been dismissed by the High Court. That's what we've been discussing in studio. We put that matter to rest right now. When we return, we take a look at the day's trends with Brian. Of course, in addition, James Wamadai will be joining us for that discussion as well. You're watching Citizen Extra live on Citizen TV.